Hey everyone, my name is Jason Long. I'm the General Manager for Cantata Health's Net Solutions Division. And today I am here with our accounts receivable product owner and PDPM connoisseur, Sue Frias. And Sue is going to take us through how to read and create a PDPM score. So Sue, teach us. How do we do this? Tell me, give me a little bit of background. Tell me what is it, and then please walk us through it.
All right. Well, PDPM came about October 1st, 2019, to replace the RUGs scores for the long-term care. The scores changed to be PDPM scores, and there's a possibility of 28,800 scores in the PDPM world.
That's a big difference.
Right. And each one of those would have a different rate.
Okay.
Well, so they came about, therapy used to be one of the big drivers for the RUGs scores. With PDPM, therapy minutes really are not taken into consideration at all. They're more looking at the overall condition of the resident, not being driven by how much therapy they're receiving. So There are five components to the PDPM score. In fact, I can share a little screen that talks about them. So here are the 5 components. There's physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, nursing, and non-therapy ancillaries is the NTA.
Okay.
So each one of those, when they do the MDS, each one of those categories gets a particular component score. And then for the total, they just all get added up. There's one more component that comes into play. It's called the non-case mix. It's just kind of like your facility overhead price that you get. Each facility gets that same amount added to each daily per diem score for the resident, based, like I said, kind of for overhead, meals, things like that. With the PDPM scores, there's also what they call a variable per diem adjustment. So the NTA, the non-therapy ancillaries, is more like your meds that they get, usually within the first 3 days of a resident being in the facility. There's more expense going on for that. So for the first 3 days, whatever score they get for the non-therapy ancillaries, that's multiplied by 3. So for those first 3 days, they get triple what they normally would get for the NTA component piece of their rate.
Why is that?
It just costs them more to get this resident settled into the room for the first 3 days and maybe, figure out what meds they do need, just a little more intense. Once they're settled in, after about the 4th day, things are kind of calmed down a bit, and they're not spending quite as much time with the resident.
Okay, sounds good.
For this variable per diem, additionally, the physical therapy and the occupational therapy, starting on day 21 of the resident stay, those rates start to decrease by 2% every 7 days. So on day 21, they drop by 2%. On day 28, another 2%. They continue to drop every 7 days like that until the 100 days is up. The 100-day benefit period for the resident is up.
Okay, I didn't realize it was a 100-day benefit period.
Yes, with Medicare, currently that there is the waiver going on with the COVID, that it may be more than 100 days, or they may not need a qualified hospital stay to come into the facility. But with Medicare, in normal circumstances, in the normal world, they would have had to have a 3-day qualifying stay at a hospital prior to coming into a facility under Medicare guidelines.
Okay, sounds good.
And then they get 100 days. Once they use up the 100 days, if they then go out of the facility or are not on Medicare for, I think there's a 60-day break. After the 60 days is up, it's possible they could get another 100 days.
Gotcha. Okay, sounds good. So you want to go on to going through and reading the scores? Should we make one up? Like what's next?
Sure, we can. So I have a spreadsheet that I created back when all of PDPM came about. It was partly to help me understand how the scores worked. So it's a little overwhelming probably with all the columns on it. These blue columns are the end product, the end rate for each of the components. So in my case here, I have an ABCD1. The number at the end of the score, a 1 means it's an admission assessment, meaning that assessment was done when the resident first came into the facility. There's a lot fewer assessments that need to be done for PDPM than there were for the RUG scores. In fact, with PDPM, you can do an assessment, an admission assessment, and that score could remain the same for the resident their entire stay.
Gotcha. Okay.
Unless, if the resident has a significant change in condition, then the facilities can do what's called an interim payment assessment, or an IPA, which would then change the score effective that date that they complete the assessment. And then it would have a 0 at the end of the score instead of a 1. That just means it's in a change in condition, or an IPA score.
Is there a certain number of times that you can do those assessments to change? Do they have a limit?
You can do them as often as necessary.
Okay.
There is additionally one more assessment that they must do when the resident discharges, but that really has nothing to do with the billing part of it. So it doesn't affect the dollars that you're receiving. They just need to do that assessment from a clinical standpoint when they discharge the resident. Gotcha.
So with this ABCD1, tell me what do those letters stand for?
So the first character is what score they got under the PT, the physical therapy, and also the occupational therapy. So the PT and the OT share that first character in the score itself.
Okay.
So down here on my little spreadsheet, this is listing out all the different possibilities available for a PT or an OT score. So you have A through P. Z means that they're at a default, meaning you actually didn't do an assessment for them. So that would be the score that you get paid at if you actually couldn't have completed an assessment on the resident.
Okay.
Like I said, as they do the MDS within the system will calculate these codes for them based on the answers to the assessment questions. PT and the OT scores we used to say they would RUG out at a thing, but they would PDPM out in the assessment at the exact same code itself.
Okay.
So they share. The CMI, the case mix index, is how much the base rates, the federal base rates for each component, what their multiplier is for this particular resident. So if they had an F, it would be the federal base rates times 1.61.
Gotcha.
The federal base rates are put out by the government. They're standard across the country. There's the rates, there's rural rates and urban rates based on where the facility is located. The rural rates are actually a little bit higher because it's harder to get staff sometimes, so they get paid a little bit more.
Okay.
So PT and OT make up the very first code, the first character of the score. The next one is actually the speech therapy. And again, there's fewer of these. They just go from A through L. Again, the case mix index, and then the score. The third character is the nursing. There's actually quite a number of those. They go all the way through Z. And then the NTA, the non-therapy ancillaries group, just has the 6 categories.
Okay.
So all of these letters are determined by the MDS when it's completed, and it's just a variety of, it's not like one section of the MDS determines one of these groups. It's kind of a combination of a lot of the questions. I think there are over 20 sections on the MDS. They go from A to Z, but I think we skipped some letters in between. So so the base rates, like I said, are standard.
Okay.
You see some of them are more expensive, or some of the rural are higher than the urban. So this is based on the facility. The facility needs to know whether they're urban or rural. There are guidelines out on CMS's website that tell you which you really are. There's also the facility wage index that comes into play, and that is facility specific. Again, a little bit based on their location.
And does the CMS put that one out as well?
Yes.
So the CMS gives everybody a different facility wage index?
Yes.
Okay. And just to note on the HIPS code, the HIPS is the Health Insurance Prospective Payment System.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
There's also a labor portion and a non-labor portion. So this comes into play as well in calculating the end per diem rate. This changes every year. It's a standard. I believe for 2020, it might be like 71.8, and then the difference 28 point something.
Okay. Okay. So you would just put so the MDS creates the PT and the nursing and all the those different.
Yeah, the MDS comes up and it gives you this score.
Gotcha. So when you just fill out the MDS gives you your PDPM code.
Right.
Okay. So when you get that code, can you tell me how it applies to how much money? Like, I see your day ones, your like, where do I?
So on my spreadsheet here, I just have day 1 through 100.
Gotcha. So how would I plug in this code to get? Does the code just tell me how much money is coming in all the time from all these, or tell me a little bit more about the code and the columns that you've got on the right hand side, or in your spreadsheet? If I just change the code, does it change different things in there?
Of course.
Gotcha. Okay. So if somebody wanted to use your spreadsheet to do this, to calculate other kinds of variations on the code, I take it that spreadsheet's going to be available in the blog article that we've got attached to this video?
Yes, we can put it out there.
Perfect.
They will need to, for their facility, they will need to find out and plug in what their wage index is.
Okay.
And whether they're urban or rural. And I don't have that automatically. They would just copy it up into this line up here.
Gotcha. Okay, sounds good. And then tell me about, like, if I've got the PDPM score here, the PDPM code, and I take a look and I look at the patient and I'm like, oh man, like this patient is not bringing in enough money to cover this patient. How does that, is there anything about that? Like, would I run another assessment to figure out like how to make more money? Like, tell me how that goes.
Yeah, one of the first drivers in coming up with the score is the primary diagnosis that the resident gets. That gives them a clinical category, which kind of starts off the whole thing. So they need to be very, very aware of the fact of what that primary diagnosis code is.
Okay.
Entered on the MDS, because that's kind of starting off the whole thing. They also need to be very aware of how they are answering, making sure that they're capturing all of the pieces that resident requires in the MDS, to make sure they're getting the highest score possible.
Okay. Do you by any chance know any major mistakes that people make?
Well, I think some of them, some of them is not really paying close enough attention to the primary diagnosis code.
Okay.
I mean, because the residents will end up with a lot of diagnosis code. You know, they'll end up with lists of diagnosis codes on them. They need to be very aware of the fact of which one would be the primary.
Gotcha. Okay. And can they use this system to determine which primary diagnosis codes are going to give them the highest payouts?
This particular spreadsheet, probably it's really coming straight off of the code that they get.
Okay.
So there are other things available that would kind of more help them determine which is the higher paying score or diagnosis code.
Gotcha. All right, great. And then I'm looking through this. Is there a grand total, or is that the grand total on the far right on column AC?
Oh, actually, the total for the day is column AB.
Gotcha.
That's the total per diem that they will receive.
Gotcha.
For that day. And if you look here, I have the variable per diem for the non-therapy ancillaries. It's multiplying by 3 for the first 3 days, and then it's going back to 100% of the score.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
The same with the PT and the OT. Come down here to day 21, and we have it doing the 2% reduction for 7 days, and then another 2% starting on day 28 and another %.
Okay, sounds good.
So these base scores are based on what code they get. Like here for the first character is a C. So the case mix index for a PT with a code of C is 1.88. So it's taking the base rate times the case mix index and giving you the score for that component for that day.
I see how it's all put together. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
All right, great. This is super helpful. This was really enlightening. Any other like big things that people miss or people forget, or any really important things to bring up out of this?
Not that I can think of. There are plenty of information out to help determine how you can get the best score possible.
Okay. Do you know where somebody would go to look for that?
There's information out on CMS, and actually, Jason, I probably have something that we can add.
Okay. Yeah, give me whatever you've got. We'll put it into the blog article.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. Sue, thank you so much. This was incredibly helpful. I'm sure that lots and lots of people will find this really, really enlightening. I know I certainly did. And I look forward to talking to you again about more of the fun details of accounts receivable.
Frivolity of PDPM.
Exactly. I'll talk to you soon, okay?
All right, thank you.
Bye.